So I do private tutoring, and yesterday I had a student. She celebrates her birthday soon, and I told her, "Oh, that's great. And my anniversary is coming up next week as well." And we discovered that it's the same day, and so she was born 2 years before my anniversary, on June 13th of 2010. I couldn't find a girl to take to an event, and I went by myself, and I had the best time of my life. I told her about it. So she's just turning 14 on the June 13th, and she understood it. Now, this is a problem that I have with our society. The older somebody gets, the harder it is to get them to see differences. By the time somebody like the girl I was tutoring, by the time she's in college, she's gonna probably be okay with it, but think it's kind of weird. By the time she's an adult, F you, right? That's the kind of attitude I run into. I work with people of all ages, right? Because I'm an adjunct professor at a university. I see college-age kids. I see some of my colleagues who are in their 60s and 70s. And I can see the progression of the change, a shift in attitude, right? That as people get older, they might get wiser, but they also lose a lot of common sense, right? So a while ago, I needed to regularly go to a drive-through COVID testing center. This was before we could get tests in the mail. And we would have a line of cars, and the testing center is huge. I mean, it's not like somebody will pull in and there's no space for them to line up. And so I would turn off my car and wait for there to be a good 3 or 4 car spaces in front of me before I pull up, just so I don't have to idle my car for like an hour while I wait in line. And people would get very anxious and honk their horns at me, and all that just to pull up 2 or 3 car spaces, right? Sometimes I had people cut in front of me as well. Just a matter of common sense, right? It's not going to speed anything up to pull your car a little bit closer, right? One of the reasons I haven't traveled since the pandemic began is because I hear on the news, it hasn't been so bad lately, but last year, every other week, there seemed to be a news story about somebody getting into a fight on an airplane at the airport. Fortunately, they lifted the mask mandate. I think that was a big source of fighting, but I want things to relax a little bit before I go back. A lot of the airline staff are very upset at the moment, too. There's been a lot of strike movements. And sometimes the lack of common sense is just very pervasive, especially when people are already anxious. So I'll get on an airplane, and there are a few issues I sometimes need to discuss with the person sitting next to me. I have eczema, and I need to avoid touching various food items. And usually I won't restrict what the person next to me eats, but I do need them to keep it a little bit neat and not dust their hands everywhere. And I tell them very politely. Usually I'll start by introducing myself. You look forward to going to Taiwan? Yeah, what are we seeing there? And then I'll introduce myself and tell them, I appreciate that we have different food cultures, but I have some dietary restrictions. Would you mind them when you're eating to keep your food to your area? Usually 90% of the time it goes well. Every once in a while you get somebody who's arrogant, and in their minds, the arrogant person, in their minds, they realize, as soon as they realize you have an allergy, they realize, oh my God, I just brought a weapon on board and I can use it against this guy, right? And some people literally think in those kind of regards, right? I had a problem one time. I had booked a seat in particular because it was I was going from Los Angeles to Tokyo, and I booked the seat on the left side of the airplane because I wanted to see Jupiter and Saturn, and the airline had changed my seat for whatever reason. And when I got on board, I explained to the people on the right side of the plane, and everybody was okay with me switching the seats. But the flight attendant was very upset and screamed at me, like she raised her voice at me. And I later learned that, recently I learned that flight attendants used to not be paid before the plane would take off. So now I can kind of understand where she's coming from. Fortunately, I think they've recently gotten that taken care of. So, yeah, had I known about that, right? I wish she had told me, I don't get paid until we take off. Then maybe I could have sat back down and waited until we took off and the seatbelt sign was turned off to talk about this, right? Anyway, don't lose your common sense as you grow up, right?